Alright, what's up guys? Thanks for tuning in to Fancy Free Philosophy. I'll be quoting passages from the book Death of a Nation, and the rest is from my own online research. So I'll begin. In the political realm, the slavery debate was not between the North and South, but between the pro-slavery Democratic Party and the anti-slavery Republican Party. The Republican Party was founded in March 1854 by anti-slavery activists and economic modernizers. Not one person in the entire Republican Party owned even a single slave. I challenge anyone to refute this. And sorry, the usual example, Ulysses S. Grant inherited one slave. At the time, Grant was a Democrat, and he freed his slave a decade or so before he became a Republican. He signed a manumission statement in 1859 to free his slave. In his time, Lincoln identified 4 figureheads of the pro-slavery movement, and 3 were Northern Democrats, including Lincoln's Democrat opponent in the 1860 presidential campaign, Stephen A. Douglas, an Illinois senator. The Democrat President Franklin Pierce, elected in 1852, was a former New Hampshire senator, and the Democrat President James Buchanan, former Pennsylvania senator, elected president in 1856. So this squashes the revisionist history of the modern left, attempting to lift the blame off the Democratic Party and place the blame on the South. So, the pro-slavery Democratic Party was founded, funded, and run by wealthy plantation owners to forward their interests, and to preserve slavery and the plantation way of life, a life of leisure and luxury. The party was founded on slavery, and after abolition, became the party of Jim Crow, segregation, and the KKK. Every single segregation law was passed by a Democratic legislature, signed by a Democratic governor, and enforced by Democratic officials. There are 0 exceptions to this rule, and I dare you to try to find one. But for this video, we're going to focus on slavery. To further illustrate the Northern Democrats' pro-slavery position, here's a quote from Northern Democrat Stephen Douglas. Quote, "Now, I do not believe that the Almighty ever intended the Negro to be the equal of the white man. He belongs to an inferior race and must always occupy an inferior position," unquote. And one more, quote, "This government of ours is founded on the white basis. It was made by the white man, for the benefit of the white man, to be administered by white men," unquote. These are taken from the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Of course, the first quote's BS, and his claim in the second quote is totally debunked by my video, Founding Fathers and Slavery. But apparently Douglas didn't watch my video. I guess he's not a fan. Continuing on, by 1828, the year Democrat Andrew Jackson was elected president, the official date for the formation of the Democratic Party, the plantation was vastly bigger and more powerful than it had been in Washington and Jefferson's day. Now, in 1776, the slave population in all 13 states was around 650,000, but by 1828 it had grown to around 2 million, doubling again to 4 million by 1860. We only ever imported like 500,000 slaves from Africa, but these numbers grow because they had children and also from Irish slaves. But anyway, the founders had hoped slavery would gradually die out, but they did not anticipate Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin in 1793. Southern cotton production grew from 6,000 bales in 1792, the year before the cotton gin, to 178,000 bales in 1810 and up from there. From the diversified agricultural economy of Jefferson's day, the South became largely a single-crop economy. By the 1830s, cotton accounted for more than half of all U.S. exports. Cotton planters were the wealthiest people in America, and there were more millionaires in the South living off the big plantations than there were in any other region of the country. The significance of this is that the plantation economy generated a powerful political lobby, and a new political party was ready at hand to take up the cause of the slave owners. So around the time of the Revolution, there were powerful anti-slavery currents in the South. Virginia had 40% of the nation's slaves, but denunciations of slavery were acceptable and widespread. Southern states joined northern states in excluding slavery from the Northwest Territory and in abolishing the African slave trade. During the period from the founding to the 1820s, the South had over 100 anti-slavery organizations, Masters freeing slaves was fairly common, especially in Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia. So by the 1830s, this began to take a 180. Plantation bosses launched a massive campaign to uphold slavery. Mob attacks were organized against anti-slavery ministers from churches, and by the 1840s, the propagandists had largely succeeded in silencing the churches. Then they began browbeating the clergy into becoming advocates of slavery. Planters organized a campaign throughout the South, largely successful, to block literature from anti-slavery societies from being delivered through the mail. Working with and through this party, the planter class found itself equipped with a full-blown moral, legal, and political philosophy of the plantation, one that historians say no previous class of slave owners ever developed. There was two pro-slavery ideologies developed by the Democratic slave owners. First, slavery was not defended as a necessary evil, but rather as a positive good. This is known as the positive good school of slavery. Typical of this rhetoric is Democratic Congressman James Henry Hammond's 1836 speech in Congress. Quote, "Sir, I do firmly believe that domestic slavery, regulated as ours is, produces the highest toned, purest, best organization of society that has ever existed on the face of the earth." Unquote. Hammond and others insisted that slavery was not only good for the master, but also good for the slave. Slaves were happier under slavery than they would have been as free laborers. Pretty interesting. The Democratic propagandist George Fitzhugh, who actually regarded himself as a socialist, he declared slavery so good for the slaves that he thought it might be worth trying not just on blacks, but also on whites and all laborers worldwide. No previous slave community dared say such things. Evil as the Nazis were, they didn't have the cojones to claim that what they did to the Jews was somehow good for the Jews. And I'm not just talking about at the end when they put them in death camps, but before that, they actually segregated them, and they had like miscegenation laws so they couldn't breed with anyone but Jews. And they actually modeled these laws, the Nuremberg laws, directly on the segregation laws of the Jim Crow South. They just crossed out the word black and wrote in the word Jew. We actually have the historical transcripts of this. They had a stenographer present because they thought they were creating the world's first racist government, but they realized that actually the Democrats did that. But anyway, that's aside from the point. I'll probably get in that in another video. The Democrats were the majority party in the Jacksonian era. Jackson was first elected in 1828, so that's that era. So yet, it took more than Southern Democrats to defend the plantation. The Northern Democrats, too, did their part. Through their leader, Stephen Douglas, they concocted a second, entirely independent pro-slavery philosophy, one equally imbued with racism, and one that identified the cause of slavery with the cause of democracy itself. This was Douglas's doctrine of popular sovereignty. Basically, Stephen Douglas's argument of popular sovereignty was somewhat equivalent to being pro-choice, except on the subject of slavery. Basically, to allow states to vote democratically for or against slavery, which is, of course, the oppression, subjugation, and forced labor of other human beings. So, never mind democracy for the people you force into a system of slavery, subjugation, and servitude. In essence, choice is invoked in order to cancel out the choices of others. In voting for slavery, a state's sovereignty over its own laws is used to revoke the sovereignty of the human beings they enslave. It's just textbook double standards and hypocrisy. So, working in concert, the Northern and Southern Democrats didn't merely secure slavery and fight for its expansion into the territories. The pro-slavery ideologies of the Democratic Party made slavery seem morally and politically beyond reproach. So that's about it, guys. I hope hope you enjoyed it. It's pretty interesting learning about this history, and I think you've probably learned something that you didn't know before. I certainly did when I first dug into this stuff. So, pretty interesting stuff. It's stuff I like to do, that I'm interested in. Politics, history, economics, philosophy, things like that. That's what this channel is all about. But anyway, I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for stopping by, and just click like. That helps me out a lot if you like the video, and if you subscribe, remember to click the bell, because if I don't do that, I only usually get like 10 to 20% of the notifications for new videos from the channels that I don't click the bell on. But anyway, take care, guys. I'll catch you really soon.